Hello, everybody. This is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm talking to Koji Imaki, a former pilot and senior leader in the Japan Air Self-Defense Force, with many flight hours in both the American-made F-35 and the indigenous F-2 fighter jets. Mr. Imaki has worked for decades in the Japanese self-defense forces, so today we want to discuss his country's military position in the emerging multipolarity. Imaki-san, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a very honor to me.
Very, very glad that you said yes to this, because I've been looking for a military expert in Japan for a while who could also tell us a little bit about the workings of the self-defense forces as the military of Japan. But we maybe need to start explaining in what sense the Japanese military is different from other countries' militaries and why it is called a self-defense force. Can you maybe give us a very short rundown, especially focusing on the differences to, let's say, the US military or European militaries?
It's Pascal, some very interesting and actually deep question to answer. Let me start with the current Japanese national defense strategy. And it's a 5-year defense plan, what they call it a defense build-up plan. There's one element in a 7 pillar of the focused area in the national defense strategy, which is, I think that they called it a standoff defense capability. And that used to be discussed in a diet and coalition party, LDP and the Komeito as the counter-strike capability. Now called it a standoff defense capability. So that sort of a capability is basically the very basic offensive capability for other military services, because you need to have a strike back capability to defend your country. But in Japan's case, that has been position of such a capability has been not necessarily prohibited, but avoided, I would say, for Japanese self-defense forces because of the interpretation of the Japanese constitution. So Japanese constitution does not prohibit to have such a capability, but based on a political judgment, Japanese self-defense forces has been focusing on the purely defense-oriented capabilities, such as air defense capability. And we have been counting such a capability on our allies and partners, such as US forces in Japan. But facing the current quite challenging security circumstances around Japan, such as North Korea missile development, Chinese coercive activities around Japan, to include East China Sea and South China Sea. Japanese government in 2022 decided to have such a capability to defend our country. So they come up with a little bit unusual term as a standoff defense capability, but against de facto the counter-strike capability. So that I think in my mind explains how Japanese self-defense forces are a little bit different from other services in Western country, and how the Japanese self-defense forces has developed its capability in 7 decades of history.
Yeah, we might just need to add, that the Japanese constitution has this famous Article 9, which says that Japan renounces the right to go to war, first of all, and secondly, will not maintain forces to do such a thing. Hence, Japan has no military, but only self-defense forces, because the constitution recognizes the right to self-defense. And in conjunction with that, the doctrine was that Japan would only maintain having capabilities to shoot down any kind of incoming threat, right? But not shoot at a potential target where a threat could emerge from. And that was the change in 2022, right? That Japan for the first time said, if North Korea launches a rocket at us, we will not just shoot down the rocket, we might also shoot at the launch pad in North Korea, right? That's the difference that at least the government explained. And do you also see it like that, or would it be also extendable to other scenarios?
I didn't go into various detailed scenarios, but I think that scenario is very easy to understand. And actually, that sort of a discussion was not new in Japan, not just pop up in the 2023 timeframe, but almost like 50 years ago, there was a Japanese government statement in cabinet discussion that waiting for an adversary to launch a decisive strike into Japan, and that they call it being dead because of that is not Japanese constitution is asking Japanese nationals to do. So that has not been changed. So the political will has been there that such a capability is within constitutional constraints. But again, based on the political judgment, Japanese government decided not to have such a capability at that point up to the point of 2022. So that's sort of official policy of Japan.
Right. And, one of the things is that Japan's policy changes in self-defense policy changes are looked at with great suspicion, especially from China and South Korea as well. And they're often interpreted as a potential threat. But I then usually tell people, look, in 2015, Mr. Shinzo Abe changed the interpretation of the constitution as also allowing Japan's self-defense forces to be deployed together with allied forces outside of Japan. But that change actually didn't lead to a militarization of Japan. That change didn't lead to many Japanese forces being deployed abroad. My argument at this point, and I wonder if you agree, is that Japan is still quite constraining itself in terms of where it deploys its forces. Do you also see it like that?
Yes, I think so. So I think what the operation you are referring to was like Japanese forces deployment to Afghanistan, Ukraine, to basically retreat the Japanese nationals in non-safe zones such as Afghanistan or Ukraine back to Japan. So that was the purpose of the deployment. And I think the argument there, even within the Japanese government or with allies and partners, is that the only purpose? I mean, bringing back the Japanese nationals only from a not safe zone to a safe zone, is that really the whole purpose of a Japanese self-defense forces mission, or maybe to include other allies and the partners, nationals, back to the safe zone, if it does make sense to undergo such operation at the same time with retrieval of the Japanese nationals. So those are the areas self-defense forces needs to come up with, I think, in the near future, to not just for the sake of a Japanese national safety, but for more broader safety and prospects of people in our region, I think.
Yeah, but this is where like Japan has been. I mean, the discussion inside Japan has been going on for decades, right? There were Japanese troops deployed in Afghanistan, and famously at some point needed to be protected inside Afghanistan by coalition forces because under the doctrine, they were not allowed to fire at incoming like enemy fire if that fire wasn't directed at them. If it was directed at the Spanish or the Americans, then the Japanese had to sit tight, right? That was the doctrine, and that was kept up. I mean, even on the battleground, and this has led to a lot of discussions whether that even makes sense and pressure from the United States. Where do we stand today on this kind of, JSDF joint operations with the Japan's allies?
That's Pascal-san, very good and a deep discussion. So the point is, if we are deploying our forces to war zone or basically the peacetime zone, and the Japanese definition of the past deployment was we are dispatching our forces to non-war zone yet. That's why, like you said, the only time we can use the deadly forces was for the purpose was self-defense. So like you said, if they are shooting at us, then we can protect ourselves by shooting back. But if those enemies are shooting other people, then it's not falls within a category of a self-defense. So a more of a collective defense in basically wartime, and that is the discussion Japanese government needs to dig into to more broad to broaden the self-defense forces mission, and it's quite difficult for current LDP administration, which is minority government. So unlike the Abe era, which was majority of the diet and the cabinet, the current situation is quite different. And now Komeito is exiting the coalition because of those very serious and needed discussion. They, in my perspective, they don't want to be inside of such a discussion because of that will have a conflict with their own policy.
Yeah, and we maybe need to say that the government just changed last week, and we now have a female prime minister, but that female prime minister is still from the same LDP party, the same party as before. But the previous coalition partner, the Komeito, changed now to the Ishin, the Renovation Party, which is more to the right and actually more in alignment with the foreign policy goals of Mrs. Takaichi than the Komeito, which is rather a center pacifist, I would say, force. So in a sense, we now have a more probably more hawkish cabinet, although the defense minister is Mr. Koizumi, who has a rather centrist stance again. I mean, it's very, very diverse actually within Japan. Where would you put the current cabinet, the way that it is formed? If you let's compare it to the previous Abe cabinets, the different stages. Where would you put it more or less?
So, Pascal-san, that's a quite interesting aspect of the Japanese policy making, but I wouldn't call it hawkish, or I wouldn't call it a right administration, because if we get back to our discussion like 10 minutes ago, we have been talking about how Japanese government and the self-defense forces has been doing, and not being able to protect our allies and our partners, and that we are trying to fix the situation. So are we going to do it right, or are we going to just normalize the situation as the domestic country, right? That's my argument. So if one can argue that we are going to the right, but I'm more like we are going back to the center from very different places, which is very selfish in a way. Somebody is protecting us, so we don't have to spend such a large amount of money for our own defense. Kind of a mentality to more of a paying a ticket fee, a train fee for the adult instead of a child fee sort of a thing. So that's my argument.
Right, but is there any thinking in Japan or among your colleagues that you know about of Japan having to defend itself alone, as in what do we do if ever the alliance with the Americans just breaks apart?
I think based on such a substantial problem statement, government of Japan is diversing its alliances and partnerships to like European countries or Australia. So not solely relying on the two countries agreement, which is still the biggest one, the US-Japan alliance. But that is not the only scheme we can count on, and we play a responsible role. So we are working more with like a UK, Italy for next fighter development program. They call it GCAP. Australia and Japan is now working together for European next frigate program based on the Japanese Mogami class frigate. So not about diversification of capability and security agreement is something we are working on instead of relying on a single security agreement.
But at the same time, I also perceive Japan as somebody who still is engaged very much in dialogue, especially with the Chinese counterparts. I mean, since 2022, we also have a Ministry of Defense to Ministry of Defense hotline, where the two tops can actually call each other in case something happens in one of the seas, right? And communicate with each other. How is the self-defense forces dialogue working with the Chinese partners? On what level are they happening at the moment?
So I think you are seeing the right picture. But that sort of relationship with our neighbors, such as China or even North Korea, which is not quite happening yet, but is critical to not to develop the unintended critical situation with the neighbors. So we are because of our proximity with China, we are operating in a very close proximity over the, for instance, East China Sea. And we don't want to have any sort of unintended conflict just because of the proximity. So we need to communicate with our counterparts. That is why we are trying to establish, like you said, a communication line, probably at the political level and at the military level as well. So we have been working on that. That is true statement, and which is very different from like a US Japan or a Japan other partners relationship. Trying to build a better understanding and a better I call it risk management scheme with our neighbors. That's the whole intent of our dialogue.
And how is not just the risk management, but the perception management going? I mean, a major issue is like, how does the other one perceive what we are doing and vice versa? Is there any work being done on the Chinese and Japanese militaries to be able to understand how each other's viewpoints inform their their choices?
So I guess what you're asking is not from sort of negative context of managing the relationship, but more of positive or trying to improve the understanding.
Yeah, and just how to tackle the issue that you need to understand the other one. I mean, even whether a friend or an enemy, you always want to understand how the other one sees you. Is that being worked on?
Interesting viewpoint, and very difficult to achieve, I think, Pascal-san, based on the current current situation. For instance, with the other countries, say, I don't know, let's say Australian Air Force, or in our neighbors, like a South Korean forces, we, for instance, exchange our officers to each schools so that we can learn from their operations and even from their perception on us. So that becomes I think a base of our perception on their forces. But if you ask me, if we are doing it such a effort with like a China or North Korea, it's not unfortunately quite there yet. But it's nice to have at the for instance, young officer level to be with them and share basically share our thoughts.
Are there, so there's, I understand you correctly, there is no officer to officer level kind of exchange going on between Japan and the Japanese and the Chinese militaries?
Except for the official dialogue, unfortunately, we don't. As far as I know, there's no such a exchange sort of a scheme.
Right. Okay, I'm just asking that because you're absolutely right. Within the friendly forces, of course, you exchange and you try to understand how the other partner then views the same strategic challenge, and sometimes, especially within the NATO context, this is then framed as a shared threat perception, so that everybody works with the same framework, which of course is one of the things you need in order to create some form of unity. But we used to have a moment, especially in Europe, where this was also done with the Russians, right? And then you had even Swiss officers who went and studied in Moscow in the military academy, and the same for Germans and French, and you had exchanges so that you could learn from each other. All of that, of course, now broke down, unfortunately. Was there ever a Japanese equivalent, like let's also say together with Russia and with China, and something that broke down, or did it never exist in the first place with, like, let's say Russia and China? I mean, North Korea obviously not, but how about Russia and China?
Are you asking the relationship between Russia and China, or Japan and
Japan and Russia, Japan and China? I mean, did the military to military relationship get better, get worse, or just always remain at a kind of mutual, very suspicious level?
Okay, not necessarily suspicious, but at least not quite moving forward. Even with Russia or China, and that will be not necessarily a military to military relationship, but very much dependent on the political will. And currently the political relationship between Japan and Russia or Japan and China is not necessarily improving. I would call it status quo. So based on such a political relationship, it is not easy for a military to go forward more with counterpart services.
Right. So that's not something that is happening. But do you think something like this might be something that Japan will be working on in the next couple of years? I mean, just this week or just a few days ago, we heard that the new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, she announced that she would want a peace treaty with Russia because formally the two never signed a peace treaty after the Second World War, which is bizarre because actually the Soviet Union has been at war with Japan for the shortest period of time. They only entered on the 9th of August 1945, and Japan, like a month later, I mean, Japan capitulated, in my view, largely because of that. But then there was never a peace treaty, and she said, like, no, we should work toward that now. Do you think this is a sign of the current prime minister saying, like, we need to somehow rekindle this relationship with Russia?
Yeah, I think we need to hear back from a Russian perspective. They are not necessarily leaning forward to improve the relationship with Japan, in my view, partially because of our support to Ukraine. So until the Ukraine situation is solved, even the ceasefire or even an armistice, it is not easy for Japan as a democratic country to improve with a country who is, in my view, invading another democratic country in Europe. So again, it's a personal view, but it's not easy for us to very much leaning forward to improve the relationship.
What do you foresee are the issues that Japan will be trying to tackle internally and with its allies in the next 5 years? Or how will the discourse be framed, especially within the country?
Within the country. So I think the next biggest discussion is how much capability we need to fulfill the Japanese people's expectation in country, right? That's I'm trying not to focus on other partners, but in country, and is the 2% of a GDP enough to possess or build such a capability? That is the biggest question in my mind. And in a previous discussion, I used the ticket fare for children. That's what I was referring to is 1% of our GDP. Very much, internal restriction on defense spending. That was the 1%. But by looking at the world standard now, NATO used to be at 2% as a goal, but now looking for 5%. Japan is still short of 2%, even after spending a higher defense expenditures. So should we go beyond 2%, like NATO is trying to do in next 5 to 10 years? That's the question Japanese people needs to decide inside our own country. And my personal view is, yes, we need to go beyond that to possess the required capability to defend our own country.
But may I ask you, like, the 2%, 1%, 2%, 5% never made sense to me, because I always thought defending your country means that you need an assessment of what is needed in order to defend. And then once you know what you need, you figure out how much it costs. And then you try to find the money for that. But with a 2%, 5% discussion, we do the opposite, right? We basically create a budget. We say like, okay, we want the budget to be this big or this big, and now go and find places where we could need those money. I mean, you as a military man, would you rather have a threat assessment based budget or a just lump sum money and then go and spend it on whatever you like? Which do you actually prefer, the 5%, the percent approach?
So we call it either a threat based planning or capability based planning, and Japan has been more of a capability based planning. What is the sort of a balanced capability of Japanese defense forces?
What can we do? What do we have? Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think we continue in that way because it's very difficult to figure out how much is needed to counter the, hypothetical threat. But if you, look at the situation in Ukraine, if deterrence fails for whatever the reason is, then you are spending almost like a 50% of your GDP for defense now.
Yes, you do. But on the other hand, aren't you afraid that if you create capabilities, it might create the urge to maybe try to use them? I mean, since there isn't all of these capabilities, usually then these institutions, once you give the money and a budget, they don't suddenly say like, it's good now, we're fine, we're big enough. Usually they find reasons to say like, we need more and more and more and more. And then, this is one of the things that I think from what I've hear from Chinese colleagues that worries them, Japan back in the days, they had given like the Kwantung leased area, and then from there, because the capability was there, suddenly it started growing and go out. Isn't there a danger that Japan might create a new militarism unintentionally, but that it might grow by actually just slapping a lot of money on it?
Okay, Pascal-san, I have a very simple answer to your agenda or question. No, we are not going in that way because we are living under the constitutional constraints, which is implemented by the civilian control as the democratic country. So I wouldn't say that there's no such a possibility or somebody thinks in that way. But as a whole country, I am very much a believer of civilian control and democratic value, unlike our counterparts in the different social systems.
大家好，我是主播周玉琴。很多的朋友告诉我们，太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌帮助了睡眠品质。现在呢，进一步推出晚安加强版，添加了首创最适合台湾人体质的天然 GABA、色氨酸、茶氨酸、香蜂草4大天然草本助眠配方，强化睡眠全期都起到放松舒眠的效果。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，它本身就含有台大专利授权克菲尔乳杆菌 M1 等8种专利菌，首创益生菌、益生元、后生元黄金3角配方，帮助维持消化道的机能。有季节敏感、代谢困扰、关心异常细胞风险的好朋友呢，可以选择原版的太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，它添加有超级食物羽衣甘蓝，健康再加分。而有睡眠困扰的朋友们，赶快选择蓝色包装这一款晚安加强版，绝对是更有感。选择太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，做好日常保养，实现睡眠自由，身体轻松无负担。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Good， 请上快点购为健康下单，而且要记得输入推荐代码，有额外的折扣优惠。